Hello, everyone. Welcome to Coping with Acute Changes, a PowerPoint presentation regarding tools and skills that you can utilize in your daily functioning in order to help with this criteria of emotional distress. This presentation is part of a series of web workshops being formulated by CAPS and being uploaded for you to always be available as an online resource. Before I move forward, just a few words about the Counseling and Psychological Services Office and its location. We're present on the IU Health Center 4th floor. Our contact number is 812-855-5711. So, our goals for today's presentation would include going over this particular outline, exploring what is an acute change, what emotions something like that can lead to, understanding of those emotions, those thoughts, and those feelings. We will then discuss developing tools and skills which would help us cope with those thoughts and feelings. And then we would also touch on continued growth and exploration so that your journey of mental health awareness, positive growth is an ongoing process. All right, so moving on, let's talk about what you need to be aware of in order to sit through this workshop and get some good benefit out of it. You do need to have around 45 to 50 available minutes. This is a pre-recorded webinar, but it runs just like a live workshop would. You are, however, encouraged to pause the video during the journal prompts. Those are the questions where I want you to give yourself enough time to be able to complete the activity I would be explaining in the moment for you to attempt. I highly recommend having a pen and a piece of paper close by, because throughout this workshop, there will be a set of journal prompts to ensure that you can further develop and think through available skills and questions. Apart from that, just feel relaxed. Yes, you can pause on certain points. You can rerun a certain slide. There's no correct way of doing this. Just try to enjoy yourself. All right, so let's jump right into it. Let's start by discussing what an acute change might be. It seems like a fancy term, so it's only fair to sort of try to break it down. When I think about an acute change, I think about an event that can occur suddenly, completely unexpectedly, or in an unplanned fashion or manner, right? One of the biggest examples I can offer at this point to sort of explain what an acute change might be are how we all had to change our academic and personal lives because of the COVID-19 pandemic protocol. We all went from in-person classes to online classes. Spring break plans changed, spring break timings changed, graduation ceremonies changed. That is indeed a big form of an acute change, and sadly, not a very pleasant one that we all had to accommodate to. It was not something we were expecting, and it was definitely sudden and nothing we had been preparing or planning for. All right, so here comes one of the first journal prompts. I want you to pause this video to record your responses. The prompt I'd like to leave with you for a while is, what was a recent unplanned change that occurred? And did you have trouble adjusting to it? There can be several examples. You might have found yourself going through this workshop because, hey, you got paired with a roommate you're not getting along with. Or you thought you would really enjoy a certain class, but it's not going out the way you would want it to. Or you might just want to start processing how going through the pandemic felt like and adjusting for it. I also want you to try to spend some moments and think about the thoughts or feelings that particular acute change caused to rise for you. Just, again, there's no proper way of doing this. Every way is the right way as long as you feel like you're able to concentrate on the activity. So do not worry about coming up with the quote-unquote correct response for this prompt. I just want you to pause this video and spend a couple of moments and just writing down those thoughts, feelings, and emotions which might have occurred because of something unplanned that threw you off guard. Whenever you're ready, you can unpause this video and you will find me present on the next slide. Now, when I talk about the thoughts, feelings, and emotions, and when I requested you to write it down in that last journal entry, I want you to try to see if there's a pattern. Were you experiencing stress, anxiety, fear, doubt, regret, blame, frustration? Do you see those present in the particular journal prompt that you just wrote? Do you think there are other things which should have made this list or are present in your journal prompt and are not present on this slide? I want you to just take a second and maybe even write down what else you think might have also made it to this particular list. What is that other category which should definitely also be up there? Now, when we talk about those previous thoughts, feelings, and emotions, you might see most of them, if not all, weren't the most pleasant ones, right? And that has been how we have associated our feelings with any form of acute change which takes place in our life. So let's try to understand why that particular theme of a thought process begins in a person's mind and eventually affects their mental health state. We view change as a lack of control. We're conditioned to believe in that manner. In fact, we as human beings are conditioned to believe we will only feel good if we are in control of our situation and if we are in control of our surroundings. So basically, we have equated feeling happy with being in control. Things are not good if they're unexpected, if they're an acute change. They're only good if we knew this was going to happen and we would have known how to react to it because we would have planned it. Therefore, when an unexpected event occurs, it is primarily seen as a quote-unquote threat to our happiness. Something unplanned has happened. It is nothing but bad in our mind. We have equated it to nothing but something which would cause miserable emotions, suffocation, frustration, anger, sometimes even guilt and blame towards ourselves, towards our surroundings, right? And this can be something from, again, a pandemic to the weather not working out the way the app told us it would. So as a result, when things do not go as planned, we find ourselves feeling as if we have no control on our surroundings, maybe on even ourselves. And as a result, we are unable to be calm, happy, satisfied. Our instant reaction is frustration, anger, and a lot of other things which were present on the list we were looking at in the previous slide, or you might have seen running themes in your particular journal prompt, which you had attempted just a few moments ago. This is where I want to talk about how, yes, being in control is a comforting feeling. Let me try to validate that for you. No one is saying that not being in control should be this perfect scenario we should just accept. No, absolutely. Being in control is fantastic. One feels empowered. One feels highly motivated. One feels that their schedule is pulling through and that their hard work is paying off because A equated to B, which resulted in C. And as a result, we should all be very, very happy if things go according to plan. However, through this presentation, my aim is to empower you to start identifying that in some instances, there might be aspects that you can control versus what cannot be controlled. And I also want you to try to work on accepting those things which you cannot control and being comfortable with that particular scenario, right? No one is asking you to just simply give up on the idea of control means satisfaction. Control means good. We're just saying that there might be other aspects and other ways of looking at a particular scenario And they might not all be uncomfortable just because the scenario is not panning out the way we would thought it would. And we had expected it to be, and we had prepared for that. So again, and this might help in developing a better understanding. I want you to pause the video to record your responses. What are some statements that you say to yourself when things don't go as planned? I want you to then reflect on what you write. Do you detect blame, frustration, anger? Basically, I want you to try to just see what themes are present in that particular writing, which would pretty much mean what are the themes that are present in your self-talk when instances such as acute changes are present around you. This would again be the point where you pause the video so that I'm not running too fast for you. However, when you do play, you will notice that I would have jumped on to the next slide. Let me introduce a concept. This is called the ABC model. It's one of my most favorite things to share in the therapeutic environment, in the therapeutic room when someone comes to meet with me. Basically, from here, we will be establishing how our thinking styles have a big role to play in how we are reacting to situations, and how molding those thinking styles, reframing them a bit, might go a long way. So let's start with the basics. A is your activating event. This is your unpredictable, unplanned change which has taken place and has thrown you off guard. A is causing B to kick in, which is what I asked you to journal a bit back in that prompt. Your belief, your thinking styles. Basically, what are some of those themes that you were able to pick up? The frustration, the blame, the anger, which were dictating those thinking styles, which are basically equating that lack of control due to an acute change is nothing but bad and is a threat to your happiness. And as a result, your belief is causing consequences to kick in, which might be one of the reasons why you felt you wanted to turn to this PowerPoint or this workshop, because those consequences haven't been pleasant ones to experience. These might be those negative emotions, thoughts, feelings, physical reactions, stress, anxiety, because your belief system is focusing around how the acute change which has happened is basically just a bad thing which has occurred in our day-to-day functioning, right? Now, in order to start becoming comfortable with the idea of how in one aspect there might be two categories, stuff that I can control and stuff that I cannot control, and then working on being okay with how there are aspects which I just cannot control, we have to work on those thinking styles, basically the B part of that ABC model, because that is highly dictating how our consequences are and what they are reflecting. Are they a positive reflection? Are they a negative reflection, which is causing us to have emotional distress? So let's evaluate thinking styles. And this is where I do want you to try at the end to connect some dots and look at your journal prompt again. And if you see some of those themes present when you took down your entry. Are you hosting black and white thinking? You cannot even do this. I never do anything right? Sometimes people would not do well in one exam, and that's something I'm hearing in the therapy room. Crystal ball gazing. There's no point in even trying. Nothing will ever be okay. No matter how hard I try, I will always be unsuccessful. Sounds familiar, right? If something we haven't planned for happens, and as a result, we start crystal ball gazing. We just start to lose hope, and we end up just completely deciding that there is no point in putting in any more effort altogether. Overgeneralization. Saying something on the lines of, this relationship didn't work out, I'm never going to meet someone. Just completely disregarding that how Something might not have worked out with the partner because maybe they needed to work on themselves and it wasn't completely your fault. Or maybe you learned something about yourself in the process and it's grooming you for your next relationship. Sometimes we decide to just completely recede because of those negative thinking style, which might be dictating our belief system. Unrealistic expectations. Things should always go as planned. There should be no unplanned circumstances around me. Example, I have to get straight A's. Nothing less is good enough, right? So those are two examples of unrealistic expectations, which when things, of course, would be a little different around us at times. We're part of a dynamic environment as living beings, as social beings, as species on this world, which is constantly changing. Having unrealistic expectations as a result can cause us to be then very much disheartened when an unplanned incident would take place around us. Self-blame. It must be something I did wrong. The group did not do well, and I bet I was the weakling in that presentation. Well, it might have nothing to do with you. It might have just been a hard presentation, and the entire class in general might have not done well in that assignment. Catastrophizing. Basically, a very gloom doom situation being accepted. An example. Since I failed this exam, I will fail all exams and never make it to med school. Sometimes I get freshmen who haven't done well in maybe one of their set of finals in the fall semester of freshman year. And they've already decided how they can never recover and as a result will never enter medical school. Right? You can imagine if we go back to the ABC model, that if some unexpected event has occurred, you weren't expecting that particular lower grade, which wasn't even a bad grade, just not as high as you'd want it to be. If a belief system is kicking in, which has some of these themes in it, the consequences are going to be your negative emotions, negative thoughts, negative feelings, hopelessness, being disheartened, and then not being goal oriented or wanting to have no aim at all. So what do? We basically try to talk to ourselves and have a conversation around how we cannot control the change, right? The one which has thrown us off guard, in this case, A, the activating event. But we can control our reactions to it. I'm going to spend some time focusing on some of these alternative thoughts to use in the sector B, which was our belief system, which was just dictating how any change is just bad and is a threat to our happiness because those belief systems are only being dictated by one or more of the negative thinking patterns that we were just discussing. I want you to try to take an effort to just work with me here and just try to absorb some of these alternative thoughts, which might go a long way if one starts to adopt them slowly. Examples can be, what are some other ways of looking at this situation? Am I looking at the whole picture? What might be more helpful ways of thinking about this particular situation? Am I only looking at it from this negative lens? Or is there a positive light to all of this? Is there a learning aspect of what is going on right now? Maybe even trying to identify what unhelpful thinking style you might be using. Going back to, again, the ABC model. What is the negative thinking pattern you might be adopting there, the ones we were just discussing right now? Sometimes just identifying that can help you put a pause in it and help you slowly start to reframe it or replace it with something more hopeful, something more energetic, something more accepting and more positive. What is the evidence that my thoughts are true, right? Especially if you've indulged in intense crystal ball gazing. Is there an alternative way of thinking about the situation that is more accurate? Suppose you do get stuck in an unknown situation where you are matched with not the best roommate, right? You are right. That's a horrible situation. But what are some alternative ways of thinking about that particular instance? Can it be a learning moment? Can you realize how resilient you are? Is there a timeline to that particular contract? Usually the case is that there is, that maybe after a semester, after a year, you both will move out to separate locations. And I always remind the students who come in to talk about those instances that, and hey, now you have a list of what you do not want in a roommate, right? Sometimes it's not the most pleasant way of learning something on those lines, but it is definitely a very intense learning process. What is the probability that my thoughts will happen? What are some other things that could happen that are equally, if not more, possible? Again, on similar lines, opening up that aspects of your thinking, not just looking at an acute change and an unpredictable event as this negative thing which has been posed as a threat to your happiness, but what are some other aspects which might be present to this instance which I'm not realizing right now? Might be something positive, might be just something neutral. But it always helps to branch out from just a negative perception of what is happening in front of us and absorbing that, because that is feeding into belief systems which are not very accepting, which results in a lot of, again, those consequences around the lines of frustration, blame, feeling unhappy with yourself and then with your surroundings. So we end up seeing results of anxiety, hopelessness, depression. In some cases, people lose sleep because the acute change might not go away the way we want it to. And as a result, we feel like we're stuck in a dynamic we cannot control, and now we have to, quote unquote, live with it. And that's not always a healthy way of thinking, because that seems to be a forced way of thinking, which has its own negative consequences. Have I had any experiences in the past that suggest that this thought might not be completely true all of the time? Can I really predict the future? Is it helpful to try? What is more helpful? Am I exaggerating how bad the effect of this acute change is? What is more realistic? Sometimes it helps to just look back all that you have overcome. And I agree with you. Like I said earlier, it is good to be in control. It is good when things go as planned. But it looks like you also made it through a bunch of moments where things did not go as planned and you did survive. And not only did you survive, but you were successful. So I always tell clients to look back on those instances, and some of them might be very similar moments in which you realize that you have overcome something on these lines. You were able to make it through, and you were able to see how resilient you were, and you came out feeling successful, happy, and accomplished. I sometimes tell clients to talk to themselves as if they were going to talk to a friend. And then I question them that if a friend or a loved one was in the situation that you are in, or had this thought, what would you tell them? Would you talk to them this harshly? Would you tell them they should just get over it? Or would you tell them how they're not being resilient enough? Most probably the chances are no, because we are very self-critical of ourselves, while we would be kinder to those around us, and sometimes we need that kindness to be self-directed. Can I try to let go of the shoulds and the musts? And can I try to replace my what ifs with even ifs? A lot of times we are subjecting ourselves to very high amounts of perfectionism. We are telling ourselves we should achieve this. This must happen. And as a result, when life, being as dynamic as it is, throws us certain curveballs, we are very, very saddened by it. And as a result, we are unable to go past it the way we would have ideally wanted to. So can we start replacing those shoulds and those musts with a kinder and more flexible language? Speaking of language, let's also discuss how sometimes we add very strong terminologies, and we also add some very futuristic terminologies which cause us to be more anxious. We start questioning everything. What if this doesn't go like this? What if it was to be unplanned again? I always tell clients to try to replace the what ifs with even ifs. Even if it doesn't go as planned, when I look back, that's how I was able to get through the situation before. I have the skills to get through it again. So hopefully some of these were helpful tips to start working on those belief systems and making them more positive so the consequences can be more pleasant and can be more neutral. So let's talk about that in a little more detail. If an unpredictable event happens, suppose our belief system wasn't just revolving around how lack of control might just equate to bad, but might mean discomfort, but it's not necessarily a bad thing. Therefore, what are some new thinking strategies that I can start to apply? And you would notice that with time, your consequences are more neutral, more positive. They're comfort with yourself and your surroundings. And as a result, your mental health, calmness, and quality is on a rise. Let's talk about building tolerance for the unknown. Now, in some instances, when that acute change takes place, it is humanly maybe not even possible to change instances to just a completely pleasant alternative. Let's talk about this pandemic, for example. You're asked by the government to indulge in social distancing. Now, that was not a very pleasant experience for pretty much everyone because there came a time everyone was reaching their limits. So this is where we talk about building tolerance for an unknown which has taken place in our surroundings, in our life, and has thrown us off guard. Let's talk about how healthy emotional thinking can also include feeling what you're feeling without the struggle of getting rid of that feeling or just working on changing it. What I mean by that is you're trying to not avoid the uncomfortable emotions caused by the uncertain environment, right? It is okay to feel sad by something which has thrown us off guard or feeling startled by it. Basically, we were working on how one should also put effort in accepting that it's okay if all is not controllable. Coming to terms with something on those lines, being comfortable with the discomfort caused by the unpredictable change. So, a lot of times when I do get calls from clients, I am not there to change their situation for them. Yes, I try to help introduce good thinking styles, good belief patterns, so their ABC model can be more neutral, more positive, particularly if I see that the ABC model meets that particular strength. But there are moments in which I will not indulge in just trying to get them to reframe what they're thinking. Sometimes I'm just going to sit in with them with their emotion. I would say stuff like, "This sounds hard. Please tell me more. I'm here to listen. This sounds challenging. Please know that I'm here to support. I'm also here to help in any way that I can." So you see what I did there? I asked them and I assisted them in embracing how it is okay to be uncomfortable with the discomfort that has been caused by a particular scenario around them, which they were not planning for. And I tell them by validating for them that how it is okay that they are not feeling comfortable with the change around them. And I am there to be of assistance to them by being a good, empathetic, and listening ear. And that's something we can start doing for ourselves as opposed to just completely shutting ourselves off. "I always do this. I'm being weak." No, be your friend, be self accepting, and be the shoulder you yourself can lean on as well. Basically, build up on that by asking yourself, do I need to work on acceptance, letting go of control, being okay with less than perfect, or having faith in the future and myself? Those are some reflective points which might come forward when you do not dismiss how you start feeling, or when you try to figure out why you are only falling on equating change as something bad. I want you to pause the video and reflect on this statement. Do you feel you can relate to some or all of the aspects which are present in it? Do you feel it's always the shoulds and the musts which dictate how you want to be perfect in everything, and as a result, when some curveballs come your way, you feel like you've failed yourself and you're disappointed in yourself? Do you feel sometimes you're having a hard time having faith in the future and yourself and your capabilities and your qualities, despite having empirical evidence from your past that how you are resilient and you are able to overcome very similar instances when they did happen in the past? Again, this might be a good point to pause the video and just reflect that how much of that statement you've been adapting to and therefore making yourself uncomfortable, and what are some things which you can start to be more flexible around so that you allow yourself to be okay with the discomfort caused by the acute change which you are experiencing in the moment. Think about all of it like this. Suppose you love mountain climbing. It is something you're absolutely, completely passionate about. And one day, you set out to climb this mountain that you've heard great things about. But as you get closer to the mountain, you discover that a swamp runs all the way around it. This is a big surprise to you. No one told you about the swamp, but now the only way for you to experience the mountain and climb it is to wade through the swamp, right? That swamp being all the discomfort caused by the acute changes around you. So that's exactly what you do. You wade through that dirty, icky swamp. You don't wallow in it. You don't sit down in it. You wade through the swamp because climbing the mountain matters. Your goals matter. You accept that it may be a gross, wet, and less than pleasurable experience, but you do it anyway. You realize how resilient you are. You realize the strength that you carry within yourself. You realize how the swamp is something you identify as icky and gross. Therefore, you are validating your thoughts and feelings by accepting that it is causing you discomfort. And those are the aspects of this acute change, the unpredictable swamp that you were not expecting, but you recognize them. And then you focus on the mountain which you work towards and start to move towards. Now remember, this might require some hard work out of you. And that is the good thing about therapeutic goals and aim, that when they require some form of effort, that means they're going to be present in a good capacity in the long term. Continuous practice of changing your belief system is a very strong component of making sure that you are starting to adapt well to acute changes. Research shows that we can retrain our mind to think in a different manner. Therefore, practice allows us to be more in tune with our thoughts, allowing us to eventually work towards restructuring them. The journal entries were an example of how you can start to put down your thoughts, put down themes you see yourself experiencing, exhibiting when you are experiencing acute changes. You were able to hopefully identify when it was a negative set of themes, and then you were given examples of alternative thinking styles to start replacing those with. Soon you would notice that if you continue with something like journaling your emotions and feelings, that you are able to do that in person, leading to positive consequences in the moment. That practice is necessary because our mind is a tricky component of our body and does require some form of an effort in order to rewire it. Remember to be kind to yourself. Our internal dialogue, our harsher belief systems are basically reflections of our experiences. Sometimes restructuring them might be an imperfect process. There might be moments in which, and if an unexpected event occurred, you took it very well, but there might still be moments in which you find yourself reacting in a manner you would want to change afterwards. That is okay. That is just you being human. The fact that you would be able to identify something like that goes to show the therapeutic progress you would already be exhibiting. Do not be demotivated. Just keep practicing the way we were discussing in this web workshop for you to practice in order to change those belief systems and thinking styles. Think of it like training for a marathon. You slowly build up your pace. Practicing allows you to reach your goal. You can have off days. Sometimes you're not able to instantly restructure those thoughts. Sometimes you're not okay with just being comfortable with the discomfort. That does not mean you won't succeed at running the marathon. It just means that such days are part of the training process in order to restructure your brain and your belief styles. This is a blank sheet of the ABC model I wanted to leave you with. You can take a screenshot, you can take a printout, and this is where I want you to start practicing in order to, very similar to your journal prompts, in order to basically get a better understanding of what belief systems dictate your lifestyle when an acute change occurs, and what are some of those consequences which you would want to be present in more a neutral and positive light. And maybe just a reflection moment of how maybe your consequences are more away from that particular category. And this might be a good time to start restructuring things so that they're present more as good emotions or neutral emotions or comfortable emotions. I hope this web workshop was helpful. However, I do want to also discuss some instances, some categories, which would mean that it would be helpful to reach out for additional support. If you find yourself increasing in other mental health symptoms like depression, anxiety, panic attacks, you might want to reach out to CAPS. If you find yourself having difficulty sleeping properly, maintaining a good appetite or hygiene, if you think working on academics is more difficult than it should be, and your social or work functioning is impacted, definitely feel free to reach out, come in for one of the triage appointments, and maybe set up some sessions or be present for some in-person workshops with a CAPS therapist in order to work on feeling better. Lastly, very important to point out that if you're having thoughts of hurting yourself or others or any suicidal thoughts, please instantly reach out to CAPS on our number 8128-555-711, or you can reach out to other emergency services in your area. Let's talk a bit about CAPS so you have more of that information under your belt. We offer individual and group counseling. We also have an after-hours crisis line available in which you would dial the CAPS number, the one ending in 5711, selecting option 1, and you would have someone available after hours. During hours, you can come in for emergency appointments, Monday to Friday, 8 to 4:30 p.m. We also have some drop-in appointments, but those are for non-emergencies. These are our Let's Talk options, which are present on different parts of the campus. You will be able to locate those locations and those hours on our website. But please let me stress, the drop-in appointments at Let's Talk are not for emergencies. For that, you should be coming into CAPS during the walk-in hours. We also offer sexual assault counseling, something I'll be elaborating on in a bit. We also have other free workshops. If this wasn't your style, you can always opt for other things like Monday Motivators, online workshops, which are live or pre-recorded. Let's talk a bit about our Let's Talk program. It has two categories to it. The Let's Talk Now was the one I was just mentioning. These are informal brief consultations present again at different centers and academic parts of the campus. All information is available on that link. These are for non-emergencies though. Let's Keep Talking is more formal counseling, and it's meant to target traditionally underserved students. We currently offer it at locations such as the Asian Cultural Center, La Casa, Neil Marshall, and the DEMA office. You can call CAPS to schedule an appointment. SACS, Sexual Assault Crisis Services. These are free counseling services available for anyone who's experienced an assault. It's an extension from CAPS, and it's staffed by counselors who are trauma-informed, and they specialize in working with those who have experienced sexual violence. Their services include both individual and group. They also have support groups. They can also guide you for psychiatry care and information and assistance with medical, judicial, and legal issues. Their after-hours crisis call line is 812-855-8900. These services are available for all genders and identities. Center for Human Growth is a fantastic resource available on campus for IU students. Especially if the CAPS timings do not work for you, this is a fantastic option for you to avail. They are on a sliding scale, so their sessions are very varying as far as fee is concerned, and it does depend on what you can afford to pay, so you get control over that. You get a free first session, and they've offered both individual and couples counseling. You can get more information on their website, which is also stated there. I leave you with this additional suggestion. These are free guided meditations, which I use in my sessions from time to time as well. Mindfulness is this fantastic resource which can also be used to restructure our thinking patterns, our belief systems, which are dictating our consequences. Mindfulness allows you to stay in tune with what you're thinking, just observing it, with the hope of and the aim of eventually reframing it. So this might be a good place to start. You can, I'm pretty sure, run it on your phone, on your laptop. And this might be a good place to also highly recommend and encourage you to sit for the mindfulness sessions, which are on a weekly schedule and sometimes bi-weekly, offered at CAPS completely free of charge, because they would go a long way in adding to your tools and skills as far as restructuring those belief systems is concerned, and then hopefully also allowing you to be able to develop more on the comfort with the discomfort which might occur whenever an acute change takes place in our life. I hope you enjoyed this PowerPoint today, and I hope this web workshop was useful in helping you understand and cope with acute changes. Remember, this is just the first step. You can always replay this to practice the tools and interventions discussed here, and you can also take it a step further by opting for all the additional things we were discussing at the end of this presentation as well. Thank you, and have a good day.